Now, the amazing Alan Jones has been to meet the devil and a mermaid and a ghost, to name just a few. And if you think of Dorset as a nice, safe county with, well, a peaceful way of life, then be warned, because Alan knows a story or two that could make your hair stand on end. Or at least he's met two Dorset men who can spin a good yarn.
It's not often you could describe the view as pure Viagra, but if you come to look at the Cerne Abbas giant, I think you can do just that, really. Come down to Dorset, dark Dorset, tales of mystery, wonder and terror. Then Robert Newland and Mark North have co-written a book. It took them 2 years to research the stories, and there's enough in there to turn you white overnight. It's obviously frightening enough probably to affect the giant at Cerne Abbas as well, put his mind onto other things. Let's turn to the boys there, because they've done the work. You're lifelong friends.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah?
That's right, yeah.
And you decided to write a book that would be telling us things that would frighten us to death. Is that right, Robert?
Yeah, well, primary reason why we wrote it was because we felt that Dorset's folklore was underrated, and we thought there were some good legends that needed airing. So we got together and wrote the book.
Okay, now, well, that's all very well, isn't it, Mark? But where do you get the stories from?
Well, most of it's from people who've told stories before in books and recorded them down in records and things. Also, oral traditions as well is a prime example. Mainly from my grandparents, I've heard tales when we used to go on exploration trips and that around the Dorset countryside.
Really? So you used to sit on their laps and they'd say, "Let me tell you a story."
Something like that, yeah. Sort of like we actually go on picnics and things, and they would tell us out, point us out locations, where things would happen. Like fountain coaches would go along the lanes, and spectral other things would happen. So
spectral dogs.
Spectral dogs.
See, you're not at all white in the hair yet, are you? Despite the terror of it all.
No.
Give me a flavour of a story first of all before we go further. Then, what do you want to scare me with first?
Well, I expect the one that's the most good example is the Betterscombe skull, which is
skull.
Yeah,
I love it.
A skull.
Go on then.
Now, this one comes from the Marshwood Brow area, and it tells a story about an Isaiah Pinney who was a Monmouth rebel back in 1685, and he was caught and he was sentenced by Judge Jeffreys.
Oh, hanging judge.
Yeah, hanging judge, yeah.
Famous in Dorset, yeah.
And he was sentenced to be executed at Bridport. However, he managed to get off with a payment of £65, and he was deported to the West Indies as a slave. And Isaiah Pinney worked as a sugar plantation. Pinney's quite a famous family, and over the years they developed quite a big plantation with black slaves who worked under them. And after, there's a wealthy descendant, John Frederick Pinney, disposed of the Nevis estate and returned to the family home at Betterscombe Manor, where he brought one of his black slaves with him. Apparently, the legend goes that he became seriously ill, probably with tuberculosis, and as he lay dying, he swore never to rest unless his body was returned back to his homeland in Nevis. When he eventually died, John Frederick Pinney refused to pay for such an expensive burial and had the body interred against the servant's dying wish in the grounds of St. Stephen's Church Cemetery, which is at Betterscombe. Apparently, after the burial, permissive ill fortune plagued the village. They blamed it on the curse that the black slave left.
Ooh.
Yeah, so they dug him up, exhumed his body, and they took him to the manor house. And the skull was remained there ever since.
So the skull is still there?
Yeah, and apparently the tale goes, this is a quote, that if the skull was ever removed from the house itself would rock to its foundations, whilst the person whose such an act of desecration was committed would certainly die within the year.
God, I'm white in the hair already. Look, you've done it, Debbie. Excellent. It does, doesn't it? God, Bennett. When it comes to researching these things, did you have to delve far, though? I mean, I know you can sort of sit on your grandparents' knee and get stories, but presumably you've got to actually sort of go looking around.
We did, yes. Mark's got a vast library of folklore books because he's been interested in that all his life. And we went out a lot on location. One prime example of this was Murderers Lane down at Melbury Bub there, where in 1694, Thomas Baker, a farmer, was murdered by two assailants. They got away empty-handed and fled to Evershot. 7 years later, they were caught arguing in the pub about the murder. So they were caught that night and incarcerated at Dorchester jail, and then later they were found guilty and sentenced to be taken back to the place where they committed the murder and to be gibbeted alive.
Ugh.
Yeah, horrid.
This book is full of stories like this then, isn't it?
Well, yeah, we've got ghosts, fairies, you name it.
Oh, I'll have a ghost story.
Witchcraft.
Come on. I don't know, you're spoiling me for choice now. You're going to give me a ghost story or witchcraft? What do you want to give me?
Oh, I think I'll give you another ghost story.
Go on.
Quite a recent one, this
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, recent.
Yeah, well, this happened in 1969.
Blimey, yeah,
At a place called Thorcombe Woods, which is near the famous Thomas Hardy's birthplace. 12 boys went from Guysmarsh, Borstal, and set a working camp there. It was during an autumn evening that a boy from the Borstal came rushing into the camp, really terrified that he'd seen a ghostly apparition. A man dressed in a toga and wearing a helmet, armed with a sword and shield. Intrigued by the ghostly encounter, the rest of the boys and two of the supervisors went back to the area of the sighting and were amazed to see the ghostly figure still there, floating silently some feet above the woodland floor.
So more than one or two people saw this?
Yeah, it was quite a recorded incident. One of the supervisors decided to approach the figure with a torch, but as he did so, the apparition suddenly disappeared.
Ooh.
Yeah, but what's interesting to note about this story is because he was floating up in mid-air. Of course, in Thorcombe Woods, there's an area clearance which marks the sort of the area where the Roman road once passed through, and perhaps being at a higher level, perhaps he was walking the existing road there at that level.
Oh, right, so an explanation for
Yeah,
him to be there.
possibly, but that's a sort of modern tale there.
That is, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
brilliant. Now, the thing is, we're standing here at the viewpoint at Cerne Abbas. We've got the giant and all his glory on the hillside
Yeah.
opposite us, and you can hear in the background lots and lots of people coming along and
Very busy.
standing here to look at it. Is there a tale associated with the giant or not?
Well, there's a lot of folklore around it. Apparently he's meant to, mainly sort of superstition really, that anyone, because he's meant to possess some supernatural powers. That,
He must do the size of it, yeah.
It's supposed to cure infertility in women.
Really?
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
imagine that.
Any couple unfortunate enough not to be able to have a child, the legend says that they would go up there and do the business and
Really?
yeah, and
has it worked?
apparently so.
Really? It's a bit drafty up there, but still, it's well worth
Winter's
it.
night,
No,
maybe.
winter's night. All right, you've told me enough to frighten me and enough to worry me about any future children I might bring into the world. My thanks to Robert Newland, Mark Northend. Dark Dorset Tales of Mystery, Wonder and Terror is the book. It's published by Oak Magic Publications. You can look them up on the internet if you want as well. And well, there you are. Get the book and be terrified. Maybe you'll come along and have a look at the giant. That's enough to scare many as on its own, I would have thought.
Alan Jones checking out some of the weird and the